Warpugs, here we are again. Miniminuteman. And I have a feeling I'm going to be questioning why the aliens won't talk to us again in not that long of a time. Guys, the last thing I saw from Miniminuteman was the Baghdad battery. And it hurt my heart to no end, because this is why the aliens won't talk to us. And it upsets me, but I think I have made the most poignant thought of my life in seeing things like this and seeing other things like this. When I was younger, about the same age as Miniminuteman here, probably a good deal younger than him, when 9/11 happened, I had to deal with people who called themselves truthers. And you had people who had, didn't know what thermite looked like, didn't know what molten aluminum looked like, didn't know about physics, didn't know about anything, who were dedicated to 100% to believing that they were now grandmasters in all the masonry arts and, experts in architecture and things like that. And there was no possible way that the official story was the truth. So there were all these cockamamie rumors and theories, and one of the most brain damage inducing things I ever saw was some guy trying to prove that the towers couldn't have collapsed under their own weight by building what he called a scale model made out of toothpicks and gum. And then he dropped it from like 6 inches, and of course it didn't move, and he used that as proof that there was no way the official story could be the official story, because certainly a square block building with tons of steel and everything else is going to perform exactly the same as a model made out of toothpicks and gum. And nowadays, these people have places to flock to where they can't be challenged in public. Because anytime somebody like this starts talking in public, one of two things happen. Somebody calls them out for the stupidity of their beliefs, or two, everybody just looks at them and just urges them to continue going on because it's free and cheap entertainment. But Twitter has become the unholy grail of these kinds of groups. X has become this melting pot of what used to be on these hidden internet forums that they tried to keep hidden because someone would come along and do things like providing logic and reasoning. But now, the 9/11 truthers have a voice on X, and they surround themselves with people that only believe like them. And the second that you say something that disproves anything, it's like flat earthers. How did this even happen? Can somebody please tell me how flat earthers became a thing? The best video on YouTube in the past recent years is when these flat earthers prove themselves wrong and then reason their way out of it. Guys, I don't have enough mental capacity left. I'm losing brain cells from things like this at a fundamental level every day of my life. And now you guys want to see more of this. Every single time you see my eyebrows twitch and my eyes squint and I kind of do that little number, that's because I'm beginning to lose parts of my brain that are very essential. I have forgotten how to change a tire as of the Baghdad battery video. I know because I tried. I lost it. It's gone. So is my entire 4th grade year. I can't remember my first crush anymore. Thanks, guys. Miniminuteman, Awful Archaeology, Episode 7, The Gosford Glyphs. After the Baghdad battery, after the Dendra lights, and after the map, I'm really, really, really hesitant to click play on this because I got a feeling my brain is going to collapse and so is part of my soul. And I'm going to be firmly convinced I'm going to cry when I try to go to sleep in a little while because I know the aliens won't talk to us. So, with all that being said, Warpugs, let's get into it. Hi, Miniminuteman. What's up, bud?
Yeah, I know. It's been a while, okay? Howdy, friends. My name's Milo Rossi, and
Hi,
welcome
Milo.
back to Awful Archaeology, the show where I spin the Wheel of Pain, which is completely covered in archaeological conspiracy theories and misconceptions, and I talk about whatever it lands on in depth. The last time I spun the Wheel of Pain was a year and a half ago. No, I know.
I had flashbacks. Oh, I had flashbacks.
I know that we've all been aware that I'm not really one for a post schedule on this channel, but that's pretty bad even by my standards. Now, before I hear your caterwauling about having to wait a year and a half for the next episode of Awful Archaeology, I've been a little busy. I published a book. I went to Karahan Tepe. I got one.
Ooh.
I published a book. I went to Karahan.
Dude, my jealousy knows no bounds. I swear to God, one of my dreams is to go to some of these places, see them for myself. And one of the most fascinating things I did when I was in the military was you really couldn't get people in my age demographic to want to go and see these old places, but like I was in Malta. There was a couple places in Malta I wanted to see, like the site of the oldest mosque, and some of the older, like the first temple built there, things of that nature. Just ultimate sadness. Anyhow,
On Tepe, I got one of these.
Nice.
I went to Peru. I did a cross-country motorcycle solo trip where I filmed an entire 18-part documentary series by myself.
There you
And
go.
I got a house with a new studio. It doesn't really look new, and that's because it isn't. It's like 100 and something years old, and it's literally falling apart. If you want to see more about that, you can check out my 1,000,000 subscriber video. I give a
good, excellent, awesome.
little bit of a tour. But all that being said, I'm now finally in the place, both physically and mentally, to pour my time back into doing what I love, which is rotting your brain with archaeological conspiracy theories.
Why? Why do you do this to me?
So, I think we're gonna get this thing started.
Oh God, the pain is coming.
Episode 6 of Awful Archaeology on the Baghdad Battery, July 31st, 2022. By the time you're seeing this, it will probably be 2024. So, okay, it's been a minute. But anyway, at the end of the Baghdad Battery episode, I spun a bingo wheel for some reason. I don't know why I diverted for the Wheel of Pain. I think I lost it for a little bit.
He did.
So last time I spun the bingo spinner of pain, it decreed that I would have to talk about the Gosford Glyphs. Ladies and gentlemen, after a breakneck 18 months, it is my enormous pleasure to finally welcome you back to another episode of Australia, home
Yay.
of Tim Tams, frozen Coke, and the smooth brain eucalyptus chlamydia bear. Did you know that
Truth.
85% of koalas have chlamydia? Of course not. They won't teach you that in schools because of woke. That has nothing to do with this story. What does have to do with this story is Egyptians.
Oh.
You may be wondering what Egyptians have to do with a story that takes place in Australia. That's a fucking phenomenal question. So ladies and gentlemen, put on your Australian bush hat because today we're going to the land down under to explore a set of Egyptian-style hieroglyphics carved into a canyon wall. Carvings that some say tell the story of a fleet of Egyptian ships that sailed to Australia nearly 5,000 years ago. So today we're going to be analyzing this claim for ourselves.
What?
We're going to explore these mysterious glyphs, figure out what they mean, try and piece together why they're there, and even watch a little bit of everyone's favorite television show, Ancient Aliens.
Please no.
So first, per Awful
Please
Archaeology
no.
tradition, it's... So I had a great idea for a new kind of visual gag that I want to do for Awful Archaeology, which
Go
is
for
putting
it.
all the title cards on the wall and then connecting them with red string. But I don't have any red string, and I'm about an hour and a half from the nearest place that would actually sell it. So instead, we're going to have to break into my personal box of string and rubber bands. You're going to have to forgive me that they aren't red. I know that this gag is not nearly as funny without it.
It's okay.
Fucking lose it. Yeah, no, that looks really good. That looks
Yeah.
that looks good.
That
looks
works. I
professional,
like
looks
it.
good. I don't know how my production quality has managed to go up in lights, microphone, camera, but it's gone down in pretty much every other way. As we're
Dude, I'm like the opposite of that. I'm actually the same. I suck. I'm terrible at this. I don't know why you guys watch me.
Returning viewers of Off Archaeology will know each episode will feature a custom drink.
I love this
I post
part.
the recipes beforehand, so if you would like to drink along with me at the live premiere and are of age to do so, then you can do so with just a little bit of forethought. I've been told by those that I know from Australia that I guess a bit of a cultural drink there is frozen Coke. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if this is like a regional thing, but I figured I would do a little bit of an homage to my Aussie audience out there. And so we're gonna be doing a little spin on what is potentially an Australian classic. Frozen Jack and Coke. This isn't Jack. Okay, a frozen Makers and Coke. And I swear we...
Do it.
Do it. Frosty.
The snowman.
I probably could just leave this in as one long clip. That was... Some jokes just write themselves, really. And, you know, it's always something, isn't it? But the second I leave this room, the squirrels... Jesus, I thought I just saw one. The squirrels are gonna be out in mass, and they're gonna be licking the sugar off the floor. Oh, I didn't really think about this part. Probably isn't how this is intended.
Nice, my guy. Oh god, that sound just... Oh,
I
that
do
sound.
love prop comedy. My hands are so fucking cold after that. I don't know how short this whole piece edited down to, but this has been like a 15-minute ordeal. Okay, so now that we have whatever this
I know
is,
the pain.
we're gonna do this part.
Go for it.
Extra. Can't hurt.
Like, sometimes you guys, like, the setup to just get things going sometimes is so ridiculous. Because every time I get ready to go, something happens. Or I'll get through an opening, I'll start talking, I'll start doing an intro, and then something happens. And I forget my train of thought and everything that I've said in between there. By the way, guys, like and subscribe anyway.
That is definitely not how a frozen Coke is supposed to work. I'm imagining it more like a slushie. All my Australian viewers out there, consider this an intentional sacrilege of your country. If I had something to stir it, that would be kind of cool. Fuck, I need like a pair of gloves. My hands are freezing. To all of you drinking along with me, whether at the live premiere or separately, cheers. Now that I have the strength to talk about it, it is finally time to talk about The Gosford Glyphs are also known as the Carryung Glyphs, and they are a set of 300 Egyptian-style rock carvings set into a canyon wall near the Brisbane Water National Park.
Okay.
They are located just north of the city of Sydney, which many of you may actually know of as being the only place in Australia.
True.
The glyphs are divided into 28 different plates. There was your like little...
No, Joe Rogan, Mr. Kangaroo, he's from a different part of Australia. Maybe. I don't know. No idea.
sections of glyphs, like pages, and they are split between the east and west walls of the canyon. The carvings depict all sorts of things, from birds to insects, of course geometric shapes and patterns. This great value brand Anubis, this, most of these cute little birds, aren't those fun? I love...
Oh god. Okay, so this was done by somebody probably in the 1920s. And that's all I've got to say about that, because there are symbols on there that the Egyptians did not use.
Birds. Did I already say birds? I think I started this by saying
Burb.
birds. Now, these glyphs have been used by some to suggest that ancient Egyptians were able to sail to Australia about 5,000 years ago. Now, I hear the critical among you rightfully thinking, whoa, 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 hold your horses.
Yes.
How can they think that? We better have some pretty good evidence before we start jumping to those conclusions.
Yes.
Which leads to the logical next question of what... LeBron. messy. What do they say?
Okay.
The translation of the Gosford Glyphs was discussed in a 2014 paper.
Uh-huh.
The paper is entitled The Burial Site of Nefertiru by Reinoud de Jong, who some of you may know from his other published works like How the Sun God Reached America, a study of megalithic sites. I don't know what came over me there. It's like fucking Footloose up in this. Reinoud's paper includes a translation by a Egyptologist named Ray Johnson. I am doing air quotes, but you can't see them because I got my fucking mittens on.
There you go.
According to Johnson's translation, the glyphs tell the story of two brothers, Nefer-Jaseb and Nefertiru, who became shipwrecked on the coast of Australia. Not only were they brothers, they were also princes, sons of...
I don't know anything about the Gosford Glyphs, so please excuse me. I know enough about hieroglyphs to know haven't seen some of those Seminoles before. So if those are actually hieroglyphs, I'm gonna slam my head into this desk.
Of the pharaoh Khufu.
So as the
glyphs allegedly state, the two were shipwrecked there after a storm, and they go on to describe the harsh environment that they have landed in. They survive for a while in this arid environment before Jaseb is bitten by a snake twice, killing him.
Right.
No bummer. Apparently, even Egyptian royalty is no match for Australian wildlife.
Bruh, nothing is a match for Australian wildlife.
After this, his
Not
body
even Australian
was
wildlife.
mummified and interred somewhere near the carvings. And that's kind of where the carvings end, and we don't really know what became of however many other people were there. Now, it sounds kind of believable, doesn't it? If you read the translation, like, it reads like some sort of ancient scripture does. But if we dig literally just below the surface, some cracks will start to show.
Let's go.
The glyphs are one thing, but none of us are actually reading the glyphs. Instead, we are reading an English translation of the glyphs. And therefore, before we end up looking into the carvings themselves, we have to look into who is actually providing us what we are supposed to take at face value.
True.
So gather around, ye children, and let me tell you about... Those of you familiar with Egyptology may hear the name Ray Johnson and jump to Ray W. Johnson, the Egyptologist affiliated with the University of Chicago. And those of you familiar with the internet in 2012 may jump to Ray W. Johnson, host of Equals 3. But instead of Ray W. Johnson or Ray...
If you didn't know about Equals 3, that's old internet, okay?
W. Johnson. We're going to be talking about Ray W. Johnson. You just can't make this shit up. I'm trying. For this part, the names get a little confusing, so I'm going to have to refer to Ray Johnson, who deciphered the Gosford Glyphs, as something else. I'll call him Australian Johnson. Australian Johnson. Australian Johnson is not an Egyptologist. Despite Reinoud referring to him as an Egyptologist in his paper, he is not. He has no formal training in Egyptology, Egyptian history, hieroglyphics, or the Egyptian language whatsoever. Now, I don't want to gatekeep that he can't understand archaeology without a degree, and Milo, you're being dogmatic in the scientific world. I'm sure he was fascinated by Egyptology and did a lot of reading on the subject. But you are going to need to have some sort of formal training in order to be able to confidently decipher and publish a interpretation of a dead language.
Yes.
I can hear the squirrels in the attic. They're cheeping. Like, if you put someone who was interested in surgery into a room with a surgeon, I'm sure they could hold a really great conversation. But at the end of the day, I'm only going to trust one of them to take my appendix out.
Even more true.
But that did not stop Australian Johnson from taking my appendix out anyway. Despite the naming confusion, the American Egyptologist Ray W. Johnson had no affiliation whatsoever in deciphering the Gosford Glyphs. To boot, Australian Johnson was, as far as I can figure out, the single sole translator of the Gosford Glyphs, which means that every interpretation that we see from this point on is based on the guesswork from a guy who likes Egypt. Hilariously,
Okay, there it went. I like planes, guys. I'm never gonna build one and try to fly it, and I'm never gonna try to tell somebody how to land one. Oh God, it's happening.
Confusion actually compounded on itself so much that Ray W. Johnson eventually had to make a statement about the Gosford Glyphs, saying, "I have never translated any faux Egyptian hieroglyphic inscriptions in Australia. Those rock inscriptions were clearly not done by any ancient Egyptians. That Ray Johnson, whoever he is or was, has no association with the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, and I suspect is not an Egyptologist." And you would be right, Ray Johnson, because he is not an Egyptologist. I theorize that the naming confusion here actually lended some sort of pseudo-credibility to the Gosford glyphs. Because if you were to just Google Egyptologist Ray Johnson, you would probably get the American one and have no reason to believe it wasn't the same person. And apparently this validity went a long way, because it wasn't long before this claim was picked up by everyone's favorite series on the History Channel, Ancient...
Please, no. Do not subject me to ancient aliens. Please. Please.
Aliens. God damn it.
Damn
I'm gonna
it.
take my mittens off for this part. I gotta use my screen so I can watch this episode.
No.
Never let them touch you without your mittens.
No.
So the Gosford glyphs ended up being discussed in Ancient Aliens season 7 episode... Wait, no. Season 11 episode 7. Season 11 episode Dyslexia. Uh-oh. The title cards are gone, Milo has a haircut, and he's carrying the audience retention line. You know what that means? It's time for an ad read. And that is, of course, none other than America's #1 food kit delivery service, HelloFresh. I, like many of you, have raging ADHD. And so I find it incredibly helpful that HelloFresh can deliver all of the ingredients needed to make a beautiful meal straight to your door. Where'd the lime go? Do you ever find yourself sitting there at 8 p.m. thinking, oh no, I forgot to eat dinner again? I do.
Dude. 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m. Get on my level.
Pretty much every night. And that's where HelloFresh has got you covered. And that's because every box comes with every single ingredient that you need already pre-portioned to make a beautiful home-cooked meal. So you don't have to worry about the shopping, the forgetting ingredients, the having to go shopping again, it being 10 p.m. and eating cup noodles instead.
Nissan. I eat Nissan ramen. Thank you.
Boom, second audience retention line.
Yes!
And most of HelloFresh's meals are pretty quick to prepare, being done in about 30 minutes. But if you're a busy gal with places to be, well, then you might like their quick and easy 15-minute meal options. Less time spent prepping, more time spent getting swole. Speaking of cup noodles, HelloFresh's meals are actually prepared by you. It's not just like a thing you buy it frozen and stick it in the
very
microwave.
nice.
Like it's a real, actual meal. And because of that, their meals are nutritious, delicious, and also way more carbon effective than driving to the grocery store. And if you sign up for HelloFresh now, you can get free breakfast for life. Yeah, that's right. If you use my link to doing HelloFresh, you're gonna get free breakfast with every box that you get. So if you want to take advantage of that killer deal, you can click the link. Yeah,
but do you get bacon? That's the question. If it's bacon, I'm in for it.
Link in the description, or use my code POGMINI free and get free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active. So I'd like to give a big thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, and an extra special thank you to anyone who uses my link to end up getting their own delicious, nutritious meals delivered straight to their doorstep. Remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, but I don't have to do outros when I'm doing an ad read. Let's get right back into the video.
Central Coast, New South Wales,
oh God,
Australia.
Here we go.
I do love that they start their episode with like the fucking spy movie graphic.
I know, right?
Central Coast,
New South Wales, Australia. Carvings that experts say do not resemble indigenous artwork, but Egyptian hieroglyphs.
My day is ruined.
Okay. We are going to talk about the glyphs themselves, but I got to just come right out and say it. These glyphs look like shit. It doesn't resemble indigenous artwork. Dog, it barely resembles Egyptian artwork.
Yes, they're both birds.
After deciphering the texts,
The scarab beetle looks like it got hit by a car.
That scarab beetle only has 4 limbs. Just saying.
21st century Egyptologist Raymond Johnson believed them to reveal the burial site of Lord Nefertiru, who died while visiting the area with his brother between 2637 to 2614 BC.
Well, that really is a beautiful, dramatic recreation, but again, it is all completely contingent on the translation of somebody who was not qualified or probably capable of translating the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So before you go right...
Dude, then put me in there. I want to tell a story. Can I tell a story? It's like the world is changing. It says so right here. I can see it in the air. Smell. You know, I'll do the whole Galadriel speech from Lord of the Rings. Let's claim that one. How about that? I'm going to go carve some stick figures into a rock over there and claim it was written in by somebody from Egypt that went to North America and just happened to be in Appalachia for some reason. This is stupid.
Into the comments and be like, Milo, you don't have to have a degree to be able to decipher the hieroglyphics. Yeah, okay, I hear that, but we haven't gotten into the translations by the other actual qualified Egyptologists.
Let's hear that first.
Tsoukalos met with local ancient astronaut theorist Evan Strong.
Hold on, what was Evan Strong's qualifications? Co-author of something? Co-author of Ancient Aliens in Australia. I don't want to be an asshole, but the qualifications that they put for people on, things like this are just, they crack me up. As someone who...
He might not want to be an asshole, but I really do.
Who has written a book, I can tell you, you don't need any qualifications to write a book.
So what do these hieroglyphs say?
Well, at least one panel talks about two brothers, two princes. This one over here, it's more of a philosophical astrophysics style thing with symbols meaning.
Astrophysics, okay. Thumbtack, no.
All sorts of esoteric stuff, so.
I'm getting madder the longer I watch this.
I'm sorry, what the fuck? Were you answering his question or winning a fucking Scrabble tournament? Like a fucking SAT question. Yeah, it's got philosophical, astro-esoterical kind of symbology that will really be existential to the greater metaphysical creation of this enigmatic being. I can say a bunch of words too. I don't need to be a co-author of a book to do that.
He's actually an author of a book, so there you go.
Now, have these symbols at all been interpreted by Egyptologists?
There've been a few, actually.
No way did they hit him with the office zoom.
They did.
Oh, my man got put on the spot. Okay, Giorgio, you're asking the right questions. I appreciate that. And that was a very interesting answer because he said yes, sort of.
A few different people have done that.
What was their reaction?
Well, Raymond Johnson was one of the first people to come here and translate.
Okay, but you didn't answer Giorgio's question.
Yeah.
He asked if any Egyptologists had deciphered it, and you said yes, which is true, but then you go on to talk about the one person who deciphered it who wasn't a fucking Egyptologist.
He actually sent...
I interpret this symbol here as a pug, which means, in my now headcanon, that the Egyptologists worship pugs as divine beings. War pugs, you were celebrated by the ancient Egyptians. So say I am a famous Egyptologist. Those are my qualifications. Jesus Christ.
Translations off to the Cairo Library, and Dr. Abu Diagazi ended up saying, yep, you're on the right track.
Okay, well, I looked into this one about the Dr. Abu Diagazi, and I can find some record of him, but I can find absolutely no record of this interaction ever taking place. But in good faith, I'm not going to just assume that it didn't happen. So instead, we will put a pin in it as one potential actual Egyptologist potentially agreeing with someone who was definitely not an Egyptologist, and we will compare that to the confirmed interpretations of actual Egyptologists later.
Okay.
So this one here, we call the UFO glyph, and people have called that since they've been coming here because it kind of looks like a UFO.
It definitely has the classic.
It looks like a closed eye.
It's got the rays or whatever you want to call it.
The dongles. I want to call it dongles.
The ancient Egyptians, we have stories and Aboriginal stories about their arrival and about their visits long before Europeans had arrived here.
Okay, so we're getting into a bit of a culturally sensitive place here, so I'm going to play this as sympathetically as I can. This is a very similar argument that we saw in my breakdown of Ancient Apocalypse, where if there is folklore from an area, you can just kind of make it fit around whatever theory you have. I guarantee you that there is no folklore saying that Egyptians came to visit. I'm sure there is plenty of folklore about things from the sea, people from the sea, people from the river, people from the land, people from the sky. But because those folklores are so broad and all-encompassing, it is unfair to take those and just plaster them on top of a poorly founded theory in order to make it seem like it holds more water. But this is how the people who peddle these conspiracies will get you. If they throw enough loose connections at you, they can sort of start to trick your brain into thinking that everything is much more connected and coherent than it actually is.
Right.
That's why in things like Ancient Aliens and in Ancient Apocalypse, you just get kind of this slew of like random loosely connected points instead of one coherent fact-based explanation of the thing that they are trying to propose. Because all of these theories are hinged on the, fucking thumbtacks on the wall. And so they just kind of have to connect as many things as possible before it seems like it actually makes sense. So now, with all of this in mind, I think that it's finally time that we talk about the glyphs themselves.
Okay.
Wait, am I out of paper? So just like
There
the
you go.
co-author of that book told you, the glyphs themselves have been analyzed by multiple Egyptologists, which is probably why he acknowledged it briefly, but in the same way that a toddler acknowledges when you ask them why there's a stick of butter in the bed.
A few different people have done that.
And probably the reason that he responded like this is because not a single one of the Egyptologists who have analyzed this site can corroborate the claims of Australian Johnson.
Okay.
In the Ancient Aliens segment on the site, they claim that these glyphs are Proto-Egyptian, which is somewhat true in the sense that some of the glyphs are Proto-Egyptian, or at least supposed to look like Proto-Egyptian.
Right.
But every single Egyptologist who has looked at this site has noted the fact that not only are there Proto-Egyptian hieroglyphics, but there are hieroglyphics that do not appear until literally thousands of years later in the Egyptian language, which makes the mere concept of trying to translate these glyphs absolutely fucking insane, because you are looking at thousands of years of language development jumbled onto a rock wall.
Yep.
And this is why I made a point earlier to say that you need some sort of qualifications in order to decipher hieroglyphics, because to you and I, they just look like hieroglyphics. I'm not an Egyptologist, and chances are you aren't either. So you look at this and you're like, yeah, there you go, there's some hieroglyphics, what of it? But if I showed you a written page that swaps between text, shorthand, and Old English, you'd be able to tell there was a problem pretty fucking quick because you speak the language.
Yes.
Sonnet 29 by William Shakespeare from 1609. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, wishing I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good, I would call her. I wish I had a rabbit in a hat with a bat and a 6'4" Impala. I wish I had...
What I'm trying to say is there's more nuance to deciphering the glyphs than having a textbook that says what all the glyphs mean. Like, you need to have an understanding of the language itself in order to be translating it, not just a superficial understanding of what the symbols mean. But the fact that the symbols on this wall span about 2,000 years of Egyptian history is only the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, well, keep on going.
The glyphs themselves are an absolute mess. I think I said it earlier, but to put it bluntly, they look like shit. Not only are the glyphs poorly carved, but they have mistakes as egregious as being carved backwards.
Yeah, there you go.
Boyo Akinga, who is a Egyptologist from Maguire University, had this to say on the glyphs.
Go for
I
it.
saw them a few years ago. There aren't any connected texts that make them make any sense at all. People just don't want to believe that they are fake. They want this connection with ancient Egypt to be true, but unfortunately, it's not. Now,
It was just a prank, bro.
before the Hancock fanboys go crying in the comments about the dogmas of science censoring the community, here's another quote by Professor Akinga. I'd be the first person to welcome some sort of link, because it would make my subject relevant to Australian history. I don't know if the whole pseudo-archaeology crowd just chooses to ignore or genuinely hasn't noticed that any archaeologist would kill to have their names on any of the things that they talk about. Like, if there was suddenly some great discovery that proved that there was an advanced, lost, globe-spanning civilization at the end of the Ice Age.
Now, you see, I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to the notion there may have been a civilization, but it would have been on the same kind of level as, I don't know, the same civilizations that were coming up with, that were doing agriculture at the time, like about like maybe 1,000 years after, like, my thing is, oh my god, now my brain is hemorrhaging. I always was, thinking it would be so interesting if we could find evidence of a civilization that came before the thawing of the ice sheets. The problem is most of those civilizations are going to be very, very far underwater, and we're never going to find them. It's nice to think about. Doesn't mean it happened. Doesn't mean it happened at all. But I would love to see just how far back we actually went. And I'm always fascinated when I hear about new finds like that might prove, civilization is older still than we thought. But the thought that there would be a global empire-like state, bro, for me, it's just like, it's just, no, please, for the love of God, that's so stupid. What could there have been a civilization on the level of the Mycenaean Greeks or the Hittites or the ancient Egyptians? I doubt it. They'd probably be more primitive in society. It would have been like very, very primitive society, if society at all. But I would have loved to see some sort of find made that would kind of show us that history goes back even further than we thought. Because for a while, there were no other real sites, and then all of a sudden Göbekli Tepe shows up, and that's really interesting. But they're saying it might have been made with hunter-gatherers. I was always hoping that would not be the case. I always was sitting there just like, oh god, that would be so cool if it was if there was evidence of a civilization tied to that. Now, but past that, it's a pipe dream, like visiting Mars. Did I make any sense? It is too late at night for this kind of thought process, and I've lost too many brain cells thinking about what he's talking about right now. With just, this was done as a prank.
Literally, archaeologists would be tripping over each other to have their name on the paper that proves it. So no, it's not archaeologists out to get you trying to cover up the tracks. It's literally just that there is no evidence, and their job is to only say things when they know that it's true. Australian Egyptologist Naguib Kadawati, who has a PhD in Egyptology, had this to say on the Gosford Glyphs. It makes no sense at all. Merely a collection of Egyptian words and symbols done by amateurs. Hilarious. Did not hold back on him. I mean, really, to call them amateurs?
They're a bunch of fucking amateurs.
Hey, Walter, will you just shut the fuck up?
Australian Egyptologist Dr. Gregory Gilbert also analyzed the Gosford Glyphs.
Okay.
And you're never gonna believe what he had to say about it. I believe that the inscription is a modern forgery, and not a good one at that. As far as a translation is concerned, the inscription has several features which were copied from several modern publications of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics.
What do you know?
However, the greater part of the inscription cannot be translated, as it is nothing more than a collection of hieroglyphs that do not form words or phrases.
That sucks.
But they're amateurs.
So the more we start to look at the interpretations of those qualified to actually decipher the glyphs, we start to see a pattern beginning to emerge. Pretty much everyone unanimously is saying that they were not carved by Egyptians, and that they have inconsistencies that run so deep that they would have been comedically wrong to anyone actually familiar with the Egyptian language. So even if the glyphs did translate as Australian Johnson claimed that they did, there is still some pretty big holes in this story. The literal carving of the glyphs themselves disprove that they were done by Egyptians. According to the story, the brothers were royalty, literally the sons of the pharaoh Khufu. And so in an expedition across the sea, no matter where they were going, they would have been accompanied by priests, soldiers, and scribes, all of the highest caliber of Egyptian society. They were royalty after all. And so the fact that the glyphs look this amateur compounds it on top of the fact that they have errors as egregious as being backwards and literally being from the future undermines the idea.
Did we find a DeLorean is the real question, though. Did we find the frickin' DeLorean?
Idea that these carvings could have been done by anyone on a party accompanying the Egyptian royalty. Oh, and speaking of Egyptian royalty, we have a well-documented chronology of all of the Egyptian royal families, and while the pharaoh Khufu has many documented children, I could not find a single record of either of these two brothers. Which is weird that a pharaoh who allegedly lost two of his sons who just sailed off into the distance never made a single record of it in Egypt. But it's not even...
Well, they're bastards, obviously. Obviously, they're bastards. See what I did there?
It's been worth trying to discredit that, because at the end of the day, the carvings don't mean anything. The hieroglyphs don't translate to mean anything. They span thousands of years of Egyptian history, and they look like they were made by a 4th grader. But regardless of their legitimacy, they're still there. So how did that happen? Now, normally in awful archaeology, I begin by talking about the discovery of whatever it is I'm discussing.
Okay.
But in this case, it's the discovery that's the final nail in the coffin.
Yay.
Which is why I waited until the end of this video to talk about the
Fucking amateurs.
The glyphs were first reported in the 1970s by an Alan Dash.
Okay.
According to Dash's own retelling of the story, he cannot remember the exact date. But he was surveying the area around the Brisbane Water National Park as part of a water management survey. And allegedly, he saw a man coming from the direction of the canyon where the glyphs are. And now Alan Dash assumed that he was growing weed, which means he was either a massive narc or, and people who are watching this video. So Alan Dash decided to go poke around for whatever reason, and that is when he discovered a set of Egyptian-looking hieroglyphics on the west wall of the canyon. I specify that because they were only on the west wall. 6 months later, he came back with one of his buddies, and Viola, there were hieroglyphics on the east side of the canyon too. And when he returned a year later with some friends, he found even more glyphs, which he described as being much rougher than the other ones.
Okay.
The discovery of these glyphs definitely have their own red flags in them. But to add
Yes, but you're forgetting they were made by aliens, obviously.
another layer onto it, this entire region was surveyed for Aboriginal petroglyphs and rock carvings back in the 1830s. W.D. Campbell, who was the surveyor who looked for rock art in this region, reported finding absolutely nothing in this canyon, despite this area being rich in rock art, none of which looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics. When colonizers first divvied up and settled this area in the 1920s, there were still no mention of these petroglyphs, which you'd think if you found a canyon with those carvings in your backyard, you would have been like, y'all are not gonna fucking believe this. I've been saving this one because it's just so good.
Please.
The earliest pictures of the Gosford glyphs that we know of are from 1983. They were taken by Jack Green, and just have a look at it.
No. No. If you don't know what he's talking about here, whenever you use an object to chip into stone, it's going to be very, very obvious that you did it. Because those lines there, he's going to explain it. I'll let him go. There's been no time for erosion to set in, is what he's basically saying.
You see what I mean? It's just too good. I mean, the elephant in the room is that he looks emaciated, but the carving looks fresher than the Prince of Bel-Air. There's no patina, there's no lichen, all things you expect would have showed up if this glyph was there for 5,000 years. No, Milo, you know, that's how carvings work, right?
No.
They can sit there for 5,000 years looking brand spanking new, and then in the course of this picture being taken and the year of our Lord 2023, all the patina and lichen shows up. Hilariously, Jack Green, who saw them pretty quickly after they were carved, let's be honest here, describes them as saying they look like they were carved with a Dremel. But the final piece of this puzzle is that in 1984, a park ranger by the name of Neil Martin literally catches an old man adding more carvings to the wall. But I mean, at this point, the cat was kind of out of the bag. And as those of you who watch this channel frequently are painfully aware, it is always sensationalized bullshit information that spreads way faster than the facts.
Look, this man who was down there making these hieroglyphics with a Dremel, he was obviously being influenced by the aliens.
And so the simple existence of these glyphs was enough for them to be catapulted into the dogmas of pseudoscience, regardless of the litany of evidence that they are complete fabrications with no basis in reality. And even though facts are slow to spread, the fact is the carvings are, I don't want to add another thing. I'm going to do my old-fashioned smash cut for this one. The carvings are forgeries. Archaeologist Ken Feder wrote about the Gosford glyphs and said, the Gosford glyphs are transparent fakes, poorly done and providing further proof for the assertion that an archaeological fraud need not be well conceived, well thought out, or well executed to garner a following among the gullible who wish to believe in its legitimacy. Jesus, Ken. But I mean, that's really what pseudoscience is, isn't it? You don't really need to think out your theory that well when you're peddling it to people who have convinced themselves that what they are telling you is wrong. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of shit that they are telling you that's wrong, but it's not fucking archaeologists. I mean, really, there's microplastics in our blood, our farmland is being bought by oil empires, our tax dollars go to blowing up children overseas, and the leading cause of death for people under 25 is being shot. But sure, yeah, it's the dogmas of archaeology that are the problem. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you don't need to make up an invisible shadow government to be mad at. You can just be mad at the actual government.
This is true.
This is not the first or last time that we have seen archaeological forgeries in the Awful Archaeology series. With just another one that we have talked about was the Grave Creek Stone, which was episode 3? The reasons behind a forgery can vary. Fame, money, notoriety, all of these things play into people trying to make shit up. But
or they could just be doing it for the lulz. To be honest with you, I've seen more complicated stuff than this for the lulz. If you've ever heard of the Great iPhone Massacre, you know what I'm talking about. And that was a couple of people being bastards.
Each one of these forgeries is proof that it's much easier to destroy something than it is to create it. It is way easier to spread misinformation in the world than it is to be able to undo the damage it's done. These glyphs very well could have been carved by someone who was just having a fucking laugh. And yet now they are peddled on shows like Ancient Aliens. And granted, I don't think there's very many people who are like, take this as scripture, but the simple fact that it went from one dude with a chisel just fucking around in a canyon to being peddled to hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people is proof enough that it's really easy to spread bullshit.
Yes,
and so as long as there is bullshit spread on this earth, I will stand here and try and diligently do the best I can to hopefully undo some of the damage it's done. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's only one thing left to do, and that is spin the wheel of pain to figure out what we're talking about next time. Oh, God help me. Okay. Hello, Wheel of Pain. Oh, how I've missed you. Here we go.
Nebraska man.
My two favorite things, Nebraska and men. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for watching Awful Archaeology. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the discovery of a mysterious set of remains supposedly belonging to an extinct human ancestor native to North America.
No. I can't.
I invite you to join me at the live premiere of episode 8 of Awful Archaeology, where you can drink along or just hang out. So if you don't want to miss it, you can hit the notification button so you know when the premiere is coming down the pipeline. I try and post it like 24 hours in advance. And if you want to support me directly, you can check me out on Patreon, where you can get early, ad-free access to all of my videos. Ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, and most importantly, we are so back.
Yeah.
When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented lest. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Nothing? Okay, he didn't go in. Okay. Okay, let's just talk for a second more, Pugs. I legitimately hate arguments in bad faith. I can't stand arguments in bad faith. So anytime I start watching a show like Ancient Aliens, I have to be completely ignorant. I have to be monstrously ignorant of the source material. I have to be. I absolutely have to be. Or else my brain starts to just explode in my skull because I want to scream at the top of my lungs. There are some things that I just don't watch because they fundamentally piss me off. And arguments made in bad faith will just instantaneously hit that button for me. So when people try to claim stuff like the Gosford Glyphs are true and accurate, even though he just pointed out all this stuff about them, this is the kind of thing that I couldn't do because I would be screaming nonstop, just like you want to grab people in the back of somebody's head and shove them into it, because they actually made a show, and it's so just annoying to me that people will do this kind of stuff, and they're speaking as if they're speaking from authority. I don't mind if you have a weird opinion. I don't mind if people have weird... I have weird opinions. I would love if I would, like I was saying earlier in the incoherent rant I went on, I would love if we found some evidence of a pre-Ice Age civilization. Are we going to do it? Probably not. Would it be cool if we found it? Yes, that would be awesome. Do I think they had flying cars? No. That's stupid. That's absolutely ridiculous. That is so patently stupid, it blows my mind. All that being said, I'm not sitting here making claims that, oh, we need to do XYZ because then we'll find the great evidence of the Atlanteans. No, we won't find anything because it's... Oh, God, my brain just collapses. My brain just collapses. It would be so cool. And I think if I ever, if I ever made billions of dollars, if I was ever as rich as Elon Musk, I would literally just buy a massive yacht with one of those, I don't remember exactly what they're called, but it's the same kind of underwater excursion module that they used to initially explore the Titanic. I can't remember what it was called to save my life, but it was just a little drone with a camera. And I would just sit there and just have a big yacht and have a whole bunch of those things out. And just for my own SNG, I would sit there and just be out in the ocean looking for signs that something was there. Not because I had any real belief that I'd find anything. It's because it'd be awesome if I did. And... I mean, it's just... I just can't believe that people get duped like this by this kind of stuff. Which is why anytime I say this and I say it often. Never get your news from one source. Never get your news from one source. Always verify what you're seeing and hearing is accurate. Otherwise, you could wind up believing some really stupid stuff. There's always people like, I can't remember the name of the person that said there's a sucker born every minute. And those people that made the Ancient Alien show, I don't really have a lot of respect for that. I don't. Because you're preying on people's, I'd say paranoia, I'd say people's wishful thinking. It's just not a good look. It's just not a good look at all. especially when some of the theories are as outlandish as they are. Warpugs, I have been ranting and raving for a little bit now. I'm going to draw this to a close. Frankly, I'd like to see Miniminuteman kind of starts to cover one of the more things that I would know a little bit more about. One of the conspiracy theories that I've heard about that I would know a little bit more about. Because so far, I haven't heard of any of these. Well, I've heard of the map. I did hear about the map, and it was interesting to hear where he, was talking about the actual origins of that. But I never heard of the Baghdad Battery. And thank God I never heard of the Dendrolite. I probably would have died by now of a brain hemorrhage. This I hadn't heard of. I'm sad that I now know of it, because people are stupid. And it makes me cry. Warpugs, I'm gonna head out from here. Subscribe to me, subscribe to Miniminuteman. Thank you. Now my eye's twitching and I've lost more brain cells. It's great. All the links are going to be in the description below for Miniminuteman and myself, including his Patreon and mine. Join the channel as a member, guys. I do early access to everything, and pretty soon I'm going to be putting some new stuff on the second and third channels. I am going to hopefully be editing this. Even as you're watching this here, I'll probably be editing the 5-ish minute lore intro to the Officio Assassinorum, which will be followed by the Vindicator, and then Calexis, Calidus, and finally Eversor, which Eversor is probably just going to be screaming into the microphone for no reason. I'm going to head out from here. I hope you guys have a great night. Why are people like this?